Rome, 1783. In the shadow of the ancient Colosseum, where the blood of early martyrs once soaked the earth, a shadow of a man makes his home among the silent ruins. He wears a tattered coat that barely holds together, patched with whatever discarded scraps he can find in the gutters. His hair is matted, his face weathered by the harsh Italian sun and the unforgiving, freezing winter nights. To the noblemen passing by in their gilded carriages, wrapped in silk and privilege, he is nothing more than a vagabond. A stain on the majestic streets of the eternal city, an eyesore to be ignored or chased away. But the street children of Rome know better. The destitute who share the meager breadlines with him know better. And the priests who see him kneeling motionless for hours before the Blessed Sacrament know that beneath the layers of dirt and rags beats a heart consumed by a raging fire not of this world. In an era when the Enlightenment is sweeping across Europe, systematically replacing the profound mysteries of faith with the cold, calculating logic of human reason, God chooses the most absolute, abject poverty to confound the proud. While wealthy philosophers in the opulent salons of Paris debate the death of the divine, a homeless beggar in the dusty streets of Rome is living an unbroken, miraculous conversation with heaven. His name is Benedict Joseph Labre. He will build no great hospitals. He will found no prestigious religious orders. He will leave behind no grand theological treatises for scholars to study. His only possessions on this earth are a simple crucifix resting against his hollow chest, a frayed rosary slipping constantly through his calloused, unwashed fingers, and a worn, tear-stained copy of the New Testament. Yet, when this solitary beggar finally breathes his last, the children of Rome will not ignore his passing. They will run through the cobblestone alleys and wide piazzas shouting with absolute conviction, "The saint is dead! The saint is dead!" And centuries later, the universal church will elevate this homeless wanderer to the highest altars, presenting him as a timeless model for a modern world obsessed with fleeting wealth, social status, and hollow comfort. Because what Benedict Joseph lived through does not admit easy, rational explanations. His existence forces us to look directly at the wretched of the earth, to look past our own deeply ingrained prejudices, and to ask a truly terrifying question. What if God is hiding in the ruins? What if the most sacred sanctuary is a beggar's heart? He was a vagabond who willingly traded the entire world for Christ. He did not come to Rome to build a lasting legacy, but to lose himself entirely in the love of his Creator. This is his story. Benedict Joseph Labre comes into the world on March 26, 1748, in Ametes, a quiet village in northern France. He is the eldest of 15 children in a hard-working, respectable family. His parents are devout, and his uncle, a parish priest, takes the young boy under his wing to teach him Latin, preparing him for the altar. It is the predictable, honorable path for a pious firstborn son. But Benedict does not want a comfortable parish. He does not want the respect of the world. Even as a child, his soul is restless, possessed by a hunger for austerity that terrifies his family. While other children play in the village square, he seeks the silence of the empty church. He reads the lives of the desert fathers, those ancient hermits who fled to the wilderness to find God in total isolation. He longs for the ultimate sacrifice. He wants to be a monk of the strictest observance. At 16, tragedy strikes. A bitter epidemic sweeps through the region. His beloved uncle, the priest who nurtured his early faith, ministers to the sick and catches the disease. He dies, leaving Benedict shattered, yet more convinced than ever that this world is a fleeting illusion. Death is always at the door. Only eternity matters. Determined to give everything to God, the young man sets out to join the Trappists, the most rigorous religious order in France. He desires a life of perpetual silence, hard labor, and constant prayer. But what follows is a series of crushing defeats. He walks for days to reach the monastery of La Trappe, only to be turned away. He is too young, they say. He is too delicate for their brutal regime. He refuses to give up. Over the next several years, Benedict attempts to enter religious life time and time again. He tries the Carthusians. He tries the Cistercians of Sept Fons. He subjects himself to agonizing fasts, trying to prove his endurance. He embraces the grueling novitiate, wearing the rough habit, striving to disappear into the anonymity of the cloister. But the agonizing truth slowly becomes clear. His spirit is willing, but his fragile mind and body cannot bear the rigid structure of communal life. He suffers from terrible anxieties, dark nights of the soul, and physical illnesses that alarm the novice masters. One by one, the heavy wooden doors of the monasteries are firmly shut in his face. The superiors tell him with gentle but devastating finality that he does not have a vocation. Imagine the despair of that moment. To desire God with an all-consuming fire, to be willing to sacrifice family, comfort, and future, only to have the church itself say, "No, God does not want you here." For a soul like Benedict's, this rejection is worse than physical death. It is a spiritual crucifixion. He is left standing outside the monastery walls, clutching his meager belongings, utterly alone. He has no profession, no home, no direction. He is a young man who has failed at everything he attempted. The world considers him a lost cause. The religious orders consider him unsuited for the holy life. But in this absolute failure, in this total stripping away of all human plans, God is preparing a vocation that the world has never seen before. Benedict realizes, with terrifying clarity, that if he is not called to be a monk behind stone walls, he must become a monk of the open road. The heavy wooden doors close, and Benedict Joseph Labre is left entirely alone. Standing on the dusty road, stripped of his dreams and his future, a profound and terrifying realization washes over his shattered soul. If the cloister will not have him, the world itself will become his monastery. If he cannot be a monk confined by silent stone walls, he will be a monk of the unforgiving open road. He writes a final, heartbreaking letter to his parents. He tells them not to search for him, assuring them that the Almighty is guiding his steps. It is the last time they will ever hear from their eldest son. He systematically strips himself of his remaining human dignity. He gives away whatever spare garments he possesses, keeping only a ragged, oversized coat tied at the waist with a frayed piece of rope. Around his neck, he hangs a worn rosary, pinned tightly to his chest, a simple crucifix. In a small sack, he carries only his spiritual weapons, a breviary, the New Testament, and the classic book, The Imitation of Christ. With this meager armor, he begins a grueling pilgrimage across Europe that will never truly end. He walks from the Marian shrines of rural France to the Holy House of Loreto in Italy, from the quiet hills of Assisi to the distant sanctuary of Compostela, and finally to the bustling streets of Rome. He walks tens of thousands of miles, mostly barefoot, his feet bleeding and calloused against the sharp, unforgiving stones. This is not the romantic wanderlust of a traveler seeking adventure. This is a brutal, agonizing crucifixion of the flesh. He sleeps on the frozen earth, huddled under sparse hedges, or curled up in the damp, shadowy doorways of grand cathedrals. For sustenance, he scavenges what the wealthy world throws away. He survives on rotting cabbage leaves pulled from the gutter, discarded fruit peels, and molded crusts of bread. If a compassionate soul happens to press a coin into his palm, he immediately searches for another beggar to give it to, entirely convinced that there is always someone poorer and more deserving than himself. To the refined intellectual minds of the 18th century Enlightenment, Benedict is a lunatic, a filthy parasite, a madman who has foolishly thrown away a perfectly good life. But in the ancient, mystical tradition of the Church, he is stepping into the profound and terrifying role of the fool for Christ. He intentionally embraces the absolute extreme of human wretchedness. He actively seeks to be despised, mocked, and forgotten by men, so that the last stubborn remnants of human pride might be utterly destroyed within him. He empties himself of everything: his comfort, his reputation, his very identity, so that God alone can fill the dark void. For 7 agonizing years, Benedict Joseph Labre wanders the fractured landscape of 18th century Europe. He becomes a living ghost, a silent shadow moving endlessly from shrine to shrine. From the frozen, mud-choked roads of harsh winters to the scorching, merciless heat of summer, he never alters his grueling rhythm. He never begs for money. He only accepts what is freely offered by strangers. And even then, he only takes the absolute bare minimum to keep his fragile heart beating for one more day. If he is given a whole loaf of bread, he breaks off a stale crust for himself and gives the rest to the first poor soul he encounters. To observe him walking on the road is to witness a brutal, living crucifixion. He covers his face with a ragged, filthy hood, keeping his eyes firmly downcast, refusing to look upon the fleeting distractions of the world. He speaks to no one unless absolutely necessary. Instead, his cracked lips move in a constant, silent rhythm of prayer. He is entirely consumed by the invisible presence of God. When angry crowds hurl insults at him, calling him a vagrant, a dangerous criminal, or a madman, he simply bows his head in profound gratitude. He genuinely believes he deserves their worst scorn. Every humiliation is a precious gift to him, a rare chance to intimately share in the mockery Christ endured on the bloody path to Calvary. Yet, despite his terrifying and wretched exterior, a strange and undeniable light begins to emanate from this filthy beggar. In the rare moments when he is forced to speak, his voice is unnervingly gentle, completely devoid of any anger, pride, or bitterness. Those who dare to look deeply into his hollow, sunken eyes do not see the madness they expect. They see a terrifying, fathomless peace. They see a soul that has completely emptied itself of human ambition, making infinite room for the divine. He finally arrives in Rome, the eternal city, the beating heart of Christendom. But he does not go to the Vatican to seek a comfortable audience with wealthy bishops or powerful cardinals. He bypasses the gold-leafed palaces and walks straight to the ancient, crumbling ruins of the Colosseum. There, amidst the silent stones where the early Christians were once torn apart by wild beasts for their faith, Benedict finds his perfect home. He sleeps in a shallow, damp crevice in the ruins, exposed to the brutal elements, voluntarily embracing the extreme poverty of the ancient martyrs. But his true sanctuary is not the Colosseum. It is the majestic churches of Rome. During the day, Benedict becomes a permanent fixture before the glowing tabernacle. He discovers the devotion of the 40 hours, where the Blessed Sacrament is exposed for continuous public adoration. He moves tirelessly from one church to another, following the Eucharist across the city. He kneels on the freezing, hard marble floors for 6, 8, sometimes 10 hours straight, completely motionless. He does not lean against the wooden pews. He does not shift his aching weight. He is like a statue carved from rough stone, his eyes locked onto the host, his weathered face bathed in silent tears of pure, ecstatic love. The street beggar has found his eternal throne. The physical toll of this extreme, unrelenting asceticism is catastrophic. Benedict Joseph Labre is slowly, deliberately starving to death, his own body consuming itself in the fierce and relentless pursuit of God. His ragged clothes are heavily infested with vermin, yet he refuses to brush them away. When compassionate priests or wealthy patrons try to offer him clean garments, a warm meal, or a safe bed for the night, Benedict politely but firmly declines. He views his agonizing physical suffering not as a tragedy to be cured, but as a sacred altar. Every bleeding ulcer, every gnawing pang of hunger, every sleepless night shivering in the freezing Roman winter is a deliberate offering, a drop of blood intimately united with the crucifixion of Christ. He whispers to his rare confessors that he is simply paying the heavy debt of his sins, though those who hear his confessions often weep, finding his soul as spotless and pure as a newly baptized infant. But God does not leave his faithful, suffering servant in absolute darkness. As Benedict's physical body rapidly deteriorates, his spirit begins to violently shatter the boundaries of the natural world. The priests and laypeople who observe him for hours in the silent churches start to whisper about impossible, terrifying things. They witness the filthy beggar suspended in deep ecstasy, his emaciated body defying gravity, hovering inches above the cold marble floor before the tabernacle. They notice that when he finally emerges from hours of motionless prayer, his dirt-streaked, sun-baked face radiates an unnatural, blinding luminescence. The forgotten vagabond, who was rejected by every learned monastery in France, is now demonstrating a supernatural reality that the Enlightenment philosophers cannot explain. When highly educated scholars and skeptical theologians approach him, intending to trap the uneducated beggar in doctrinal errors or expose him as a fraud, they are instantly silenced. Benedict speaks of the impenetrable mysteries of the Holy Trinity, the Incarnation, and the agonizing sorrow of the Virgin Mary, with a precision and burning eloquence that cannot be found in any university textbook. He does not speak from intellectual study or academic pride. He speaks from direct, terrifying experience. He is describing a spiritual landscape he walks through every single day. Yet, the greatest, most undeniable miracle of Benedict Joseph Labre is not the astonishing levitations or the profound mystical knowledge. It is his absolute, crushing humility. If a passerby suddenly realizes his holiness and attempts to praise him, Benedict breaks down in bitter, agonizing tears, genuinely horrified that they would honor such a wretched, filthy sinner. He actively flees from any sign of reverence, hiding deeper within the shadows of the ruins. He wants nothing more than to be the forgotten dirt beneath the feet of humanity, seen only by the crucified God he loves with a violent, consuming passion. Without speaking a single sermon, he is teaching an arrogant, wealthy world a terrifying lesson: that the kingdom of heaven does not belong to the strong, the successful, or the respected. It belongs exclusively to the broken. April 1783. Holy Week descends upon Rome. The city is preparing to commemorate the passion and death of Christ. But on the unforgiving cobblestone streets, a living passion is reaching its agonizing conclusion. Benedict Joseph Labre is only 35 years old, yet his broken, starved body looks like that of an ancient patriarch. His relentless fasting, the brutal exposure to the freezing winters, and the absolute lack of basic human care have finally demanded their toll. His fragile heart, which has burned so violently and completely for God, is physically giving out. On the morning of April 16th, Wednesday of Holy Week, Benedict drags his exhausted frame to the majestic church of Santa Maria ai Monti. He collapses on the hard stone steps, entirely drained of his remaining life force. He cannot stand. He cannot speak. The ragged beggar who has walked tens of thousands of miles across the harsh landscapes of Europe can no longer take a single, agonizing step. Seeing him lying near death, a compassionate local butcher named Francesco Zaccarelli gently lifts the filthy, dying vagabond and carries him away from the bustling street and into his own home. It is a profound, poetic irony. The man who adamantly refused the comfort of a roof and a bed for more than a decade is finally laid upon one for his final hours. As the sun begins to set over the eternal city, there is no dramatic final speech. There are no grand theological declarations for the history books. Benedict Joseph Labre simply fades away in profound, absolute silence. He clutches his worn, tear-stained crucifix tightly against his chest, completely abandoned to the holy will of the Creator he sought in the forgotten ruins. He breathes his last. The fool for Christ has finally returned home, but what happens next defies all natural explanation. Before the butcher can even notify the local priests, before any church bells toll to announce his passing, a sudden, inexplicable phenomenon erupts in the streets. The street children of Rome, the orphans, the urchins, the very lowest of society, begin to run wildly through the winding alleys and grand piazzas. No human has told them what happened inside the butcher's house, yet they are shouting in absolute unison, their desperate voices echoing off the ancient stone walls. "È morto il santo! The saint is dead! The saint is dead!" It is as if the Holy Spirit itself has bypassed the elite theologians and the powerful cardinals, choosing instead to announce the death of the ultimate beggar through the mouths of the poorest children. The news spreads like an uncontrollable wildfire. Within hours, the butcher's modest house is entirely besieged by a massive, weeping crowd. The wealthy nobleman who once completely ignored him, the priests who once deeply questioned him, and the destitute who shared the gutters with him now fight desperately just to touch his tattered, vermin-infested rags. The despised, forgotten vagabond is suddenly the undisputed king of Rome. The death of Benedict Joseph Labre was not the final, quiet chapter of a ruined life, but the sudden, explosive revelation of a power far beyond the boundaries of the natural world. As soon as his exhausted heart stopped beating inside the kindly butcher's home, a terrifying and inexplicable phenomenon began. The body of the holy beggar, which had endured decades of devastating malnutrition, bone-chilling cold, and untreated diseases, showed absolutely no signs of rigor mortis or physical decay. Instead of the expected stench of a nameless corpse dragged from the gutters, a pure, unearthly, and overwhelmingly sweet fragrance began to emanate from his filthy rags, filling the small room and spilling out into the narrow, crowded alleys of Rome. The massive crowds laying siege to the house did not gather out of morbid, passing curiosity. They were drawn by a violent, undeniable spiritual hunger. The heavily armed papal guards, dispatched urgently by the Vatican to maintain order, were completely paralyzed by the sheer, surging ocean of humanity. Every rigid class of Rome's opulent society, from powerful cardinals draped in brilliant crimson silk to desperate, weeping widows, from arrogant noblemen to the lowest thieves of the underworld, fell to their knees before the remains of a man they would have instinctively spat upon just days prior. They desperately tore at his filthy, vermin-infested coat, clawing for a single thread, a matted lock of hair, or even the scraped dust from his calloused, scarred feet. To them, the absolute trash of the earth had instantly transformed into priceless holy relics, vibrating with the direct, healing power of heaven. And the miracles were undeniable. Hundreds of the desperate and the dying, carrying incurable wounds, malignant tumors and blind eyes, were brought to his side with absolute, terrifying faith. The rigorous, highly skeptical investigations of the Church documented a staggering reality. A mere touch of Benedict's tattered garments resulted in instantaneous, verifiable healings. The most elite physicians of Rome, the proud intellectuals who had championed the atheistic, scientific positivism of the Enlightenment, stood in absolute, stunned silence. They watched incurable terminal diseases vanish before their very eyes, entirely devoid of any logical or medical explanation. Human science, in all its arrogant glory, was violently forced to its knees before the absolute power of pure, unadulterated faith. In the few short months following his death, over 136 distinct, undeniable miracles of healing were officially recorded and verified by strict medical boards. The homeless vagabond left behind absolutely no earthly wealth, not a single copper coin, yet he bequeathed a spiritual empire that violently shook the faith of an entire continent. He used his own physical destruction to prove to a world blinded by wealth and status that when you are willing to lose absolutely everything for Christ, God grants you the power to change the world. The utter, crushing poverty of Benedict Joseph Labre became the Church's greatest, most terrifying treasure, a haunting, eternal defiance against the pride of man. The official response of the Catholic Church to the overwhelming tidal wave of miracles was inevitable. The rigid, highly skeptical theologians who once viewed the filthy vagabond with deep suspicion were now forced to meticulously document his supernatural intercession. Decades passed, but the devotion to the holy beggar only intensified. In 1881, Pope Leo XIII officially raised Benedict Joseph Labre to the highest altars of the Universal Church, canonizing him as a saint. The fragile, rejected young man who had the heavy doors of every prestigious monastery slammed in his face was now permanently enshrined as a timeless model of heroic virtue for every priest, monk, and layperson in the world. But to relegate Saint Benedict Joseph Labre to the dusty pages of history would be a tragic mistake. His agonizing, extraordinary life is not merely a fascinating tale from the 18th century. It is a violent, necessary earthquake designed to shatter the comfortable illusions of our modern world. Today, we live in an era entirely consumed by the frantic accumulation of wealth, the desperate curation of our public image, and the terrifying anxiety of losing our social status. We exhaust our bodies and our minds building temporary empires of dust, terrified of poverty, terrified of discomfort, and deeply terrified of being judged as failures by a society that does not genuinely care about our eternal souls. Benedict stands as a terrifying, luminous contradiction to all our modern anxieties. He forces you to look deeply into the mirror and confront a profoundly uncomfortable truth. How much of your daily stress, your deep-seated depression, and your restless anxiety comes from desperately clinging to things that will eventually decay? How much spiritual peace are you willingly sacrificing just to maintain a fragile reputation? Benedict willingly threw away his reputation. He actively embraced the very failure and humiliation that we spend our entire lives running away from. Because he had absolutely nothing left to lose, he was the freest man on the face of the earth. He possessed nothing, Yet he held the creator of the universe within his shattered heart. If you have ever felt like a profound failure in the eyes of the world, if you have ever been rejected by the people or the institutions you loved most, or if you feel that your life has not gone according to your careful plans, look closely at this beggar. God did not use Benedict's strengths to change the world. He used his absolute, crushing weakness. He is the ultimate patron saint of the homeless, the misunderstood, the outcast, and those who feel utterly abandoned by human society. His life is a haunting, beautiful promise. You do not need perfect health, a successful career, or the fleeting approval of mankind to achieve eternal greatness. The legacy of Saint Benedict Joseph Labre does not end in a quiet glass reliquary in Rome. It echoes violently in every silent, forgotten corner of our world today. When you walk past the homeless man shivering on the street corner, when you see the elderly widow sitting entirely alone in the back pew of a dark church, or when you yourself look into the mirror and feel the terrifying, heavy weight of invisibility creeping into your own life as you age, Benedict is standing right there. He is the ultimate patron saint of the overlooked, the discarded, and the deeply broken. Perhaps you are watching this exact video right now and feeling the crushing burden of your own physical limitations. You notice the deepening wrinkles etching across your face, the painful stiffness in your joints that greets you every single morning. The heartbreaking way a fast-paced society seems to look right through you as your youth fades. The modern world constantly lies to you, telling you that your inherent value diminishes the moment your physical strength and economic utility fade. But Benedict's extraordinary life screams a glorious, defiant truth against that darkness. Your physical ailments, your quiet loneliness, your unspoken, heavy grief, these are not signs of your defeat. If you intentionally unite them with the suffering of Christ, they become the very weapons of your ultimate victory. Your aging, aching body is simply the necessary crumbling of the external ruins, making way for the magnificent, eternal sanctuary of your soul to be fully revealed. So I ask you a profound question today. What are the tattered rags of pride, past regret, or endless earthly anxiety that you are still desperately clinging to? What would happen if you finally found the courage to let them drop to the dusty floor and completely trusted God with your absolute emptiness? You do not have to walk barefoot across the freezing roads of Europe to achieve holiness. You simply have to be completely willing to be small and forgotten in the eyes of the world, so that you can become infinitely vast and beloved in the eyes of heaven. If the incredible, heart-wrenching story of this holy beggar has touched your soul today, do not let this profound moment simply fade away into the noise of the internet. We invite you to subscribe to the Saints of God. Join our faithful, growing community of believers who are actively seeking the profound, hidden truths and the forgotten miracles of our Catholic faith. Share this video right now with someone who feels lost, someone who is silently struggling with feelings of worthlessness, or someone who desperately needs a reminder that God's most spectacular miracles always happen in the darkest, most ruined places. Please leave a comment below and tell us honestly, what is one heavy, worldly burden you are asking Saint Benedict Joseph Labre to help you finally let go of today? May you find the absolute courage to build your true treasure in heaven, and may the holy beggar of Rome intercede for us all. The night falls once again over the ancient, silent ruins of the Colosseum. Centuries have passed since a fragile, ragged beggar called these cold, unforgiving stones his earthly home. The grand empires of men have continued to rise in arrogance and inevitably collapse into forgotten dust. The frantic noise of the modern world has only grown louder, more chaotic, and infinitely more desperate for meaning. Yet, if you quiet your mind and listen very closely in the deep, sacred silence of your own soul, you can still hear the slow, deliberate footsteps of Benedict Joseph Labre walking the dusty roads of eternity. He does not leave us with a comfortable, easy message. True saints of God rarely do. They are specifically sent by heaven to be a glorious, violent disruption to our worldly slumber. Benedict intimately challenges you to look at the comfortable clothes in your closet, the money carefully hoarded in your bank account, and the proud titles attached to your name, and to realize a terrifying truth. None of it, absolutely none of it, will pass with you through the narrow, inevitable gates of death. The only currency recognized in the kingdom of heaven is love. The only things you can carry with you are the painful sacrifices you made in absolute secret, and the times you willingly embraced your own crushing poverty of spirit, allowing the Creator to become your ultimate and only wealth. As we finally close this profound chapter of His extraordinary life, let us offer a silent, unified prayer from wherever you are watching in the world right now. Lord Almighty, gently strip away the heavy, suffocating layers of human pride and earthly attachment that constantly blind us to your divine presence. Give us the terrifying, beautiful courage of Saint Benedict Joseph Labre. Make us entirely willing to become absolute fools in the arrogant eyes of this modern world, so that we may become perfectly wise in yours. When we feel entirely abandoned, completely misunderstood, or deeply broken by the heavy trials of this life, intimately remind us that your greatest, most magnificent sanctuaries are always built in the deepest ruins of our hearts. Thank you for walking this arduous, beautiful spiritual journey with us today on the Saints of God. Always remember, the path to eternal salvation is rarely a wide, comfortable, golden highway. It is a narrow, rugged, tear-stained trail, often walked entirely alone, and often walked in profound sorrow. But it is the only road that ultimately leads to true, everlasting peace and the face of God. Until we meet again to uncover the next profound mystery of faith, may God Almighty bless you abundantly. May He keep you safely hidden in His profound grace, and may the holy, glorious Beggar of Rome fiercely watch over your every step. Amen.